In the last lesson, we really focused on key vocabulary for reporting and describing graphs and charts and tables. But in this lesson, we're going to be learning the essential vocabulary that you need to be able to report and successfully answer map questions for IELTS Writing Task 1. Before we move on, let's quickly review our understanding of the visual information and question type maps. So, as you may have already considered, the language we use when reporting on map questions is quite different to that used in other question types. So here we have a standard map that you could see in your IELTS Writing Task 1 Test 2. We can see that we have the same map from two different times. And of course, there are changes to this map. Underneath, we also have a key. That is not always included on map question types. At its heart, we need to report the location and changes, such as buildings being added, made over the two time periods. So instead of discussing figures and data, we're reporting all about the different kinds of changes we can see on the maps. And of course, that means the language is going to be very different. And really, there are two types of language that we're going to be focusing on in this lesson, and that is vocabulary all about location, as well as we're going to be looking at some vocabulary to help us describe the changes we see on the map. So let's begin with looking at location. So there are two ways to describe location, either using the points from a compass or using prepositional phrases. And we're going to look at some examples from both. So here we have a standard 8-point compass, beginning with north, east, south, and west. But we also need to consider northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest. So they're the 8 key pieces of vocabulary when describing location from a compass. Let's take a look at using this language against a map. And we'll begin with the forest to the west of the map in 1990. Here we go, and here is my example. In the west of the map, trees were cleared and a library was built. So I'm starting off with using the points of the compass, the west of the map. Trees were cleared and a library was built. Let's take a look at another example, and we'll go to the lake at the bottom of both maps. And here is my example sentence. In 2015, to the northwest and northeast of the lake, 2 roads were built to create a crossroad. So there I'm using 2 different points from the compass. Let's take a look at one final example, and we'll go to the warehouses and petrol station here. So we can see in 1990 there were in fact 3 warehouses, whereas now it looks like we've had a petrol station added, as well as a factory. But I'm just going to describe the warehouse and the petrol station. To the north of the bridge, 2 warehouse buildings were destroyed and a petrol station was built. You could, of course, also say that a factory was added. Okay, so there are some examples for using the points of the compass. But as I said, we can also use prepositional phrases. And here is some really useful prepositional phrases for you. Between, next to, parallel to, nearby to, across from, and opposite. So some really good vocabulary that you can use in your Task 1 report for maps. Okay, let's take a look at an example map. And here we go. So we have a map of Frenton in 1990 and 2012 with a lot of changes here. So we'll use the prepositional phrase between. And here is my example. In 2012, the cafe and park were developed into a hotel and golf course that was between the flats and High Street. So there I'm using this prepositional phrase between to give the location, to report where this is on the map. And of course the IELTS examiner will be impressed if you can accurately use these prepositional phrases. Okay, let's take a look at one more example. Parallel to. So if something is sat directly across from another object, we can say it is parallel to. The restaurant was developed and remained parallel to the school, which was unchanged. So we can see that on the bottom map in the northwest, the restaurant and school. They sit across from each other, facing the same direction. They are parallel to each other. Okay, so just a few examples of using prepositional phrases for maps. So now we're going to move on to another really important section of language for reporting on maps. So you must report the changes and developments to the buildings and facilities, of course, that you can see on the given map. And here is a really useful table that you can use when writing or practicing to write your map report. So addition, things that are added. We have built, added, constructed, planted and erected. Things that are taken away, removed, demolished, knocked down, pulled down, removed, torn down. Things that have changed, converted, repurposed, redeveloped, made into or renovated. And buildings or facilities that have grown, enlarged, expanded, made bigger and developed. So this table is super useful when you are writing a map report. So I suggest either writing this down or bookmarking this section of the video lesson. So let's take a look at this language used against a previous IELTS Task 1 map. And here we have a map of some place in 1986 and present day. So let's use these really useful verbs to describe the buildings here. So they have been added. This is an addition. To the west of the primary school, a new road was added and a number of houses constructed. Okay, let's take a look at another example. And we're going to focus on this section of the map, which in 1986 appears to be farmland. Present day, we've added more houses and a road. So let's take a look at the example sentence here. The farmland was removed, where a large road with houses was constructed. Okay, so just a few examples of using this really important vocabulary here. And you need to be able to use a range of this vocabulary. If you were to always use built, the examiner is going to mark you down in your lexical resource. You need to really know a range of vocabulary. So do practice using this table. Okay, that brings us to the end of this lesson for essential vocabulary for maps. If you would like a bit more along possibly examples against the table, maybe for some other maps, then please let me know and I can add it into the course. See you in the next lesson.